Greetings, everyone. Hello, hello, welcome. My name is London, and my name is London, and I am a national co-chair for UNA Women, an affinity group of the United Nations Association of the United States of America. Together, we are pleased to welcome you to our parallel event today entitled Addressing the Impact of Forever Chemicals on Girls and Women. Before we begin our discussion, I'd like to share with you who we are and what we do. We are the United Nations Association of the United States of America, or UNA-USA. We are a program of the United Nations Foundation, and we are a proud movement of 20,000 Americans with more than 200 chapters across the United States dedicated to educating, inspiring, and mobilizing Americans to support the principles and vital work of the United Nations and its agencies and achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, by the year 2030. UNA-USA and its partner organization, the Better World Campaign, comprise the largest network of UN advocates in the world. As the UNA-USA UNA Women Affinity Group, we aim to effectively engage UNA-USA members, partners, and the general public on gender equality, gender equity, and the intersectional human rights of women and girls locally and globally. In addition to our committee, we are a network of more than 3,000 UNA-USA members who are also gender equity and equality advocates, particularly in support of SDG 5, and that's gender equality, of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We have a very exciting panel of outstanding leaders for our important discussion today. And I am so pleased to turn our program over to our extraordinary moderator and fellow UNA Women Committee member, Ms. Lady T. Thompson. Lady T, you have the floor.
Greetings, greetings. Happy Tuesday, everyone. I am so thrilled to be here today. This is going to be a very insightful and deliberate discussion. So let's go straight into it. First up, we have our panelists. Ohno Woodall. She's a program officer at the Secretariats of the Basel and Stockholm Conventions, a part of the United Nations Environmental Program. Hey, how are you doing? Next up, we have Dr. Maria Neira. She's a director of the Environment, Climate Change, and Health Department of the World Health Organization. Next up, we have one of UNA-USA's own, Himaja Nagireddy, who is a champion change maker and a human rights defender. And she is also the co-chair of UNA Women Affinity Group and a Northeast representative of the UNA-USA National Council. Last but definitely not least, we have Teena Halbig. She's the vice president of the UNA-USA Kentucky Division, a Mid-East representative of the UNA-USA National Council, and our in-house expert on our subject matter today, polyfluoroalkyl. So I'm gonna jump into it. Okay. Now, this is such a very important discussion. So as I go around and ask each of the panelists a question, before you respond, please give us 1 minute about what role you play with the different organizations and entities that you represent. So my first question, I'm going to open it up to Dr. Maria. What are pre and polyfluoroalkyl substances, and why are they commonly known as forever chemicals? Now, if you can tell us about your role,
yes,
I would really, we would all really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lady T, and thank you, dear panelists. I'm so happy to be with you, and it's always a pleasure to be among women, honestly. Nothing against male. I mean, I'm very pleased and happy with them as well. I have a son myself, so I love to be surrounded by them, but it's a pleasure to have this discussion, and I'm sure it will be very interesting. What do I do? Well, essentially what I'm trying to do is a massive primary prevention. So we are trying in WHO, in our department, to avoid exposure to environmental risk factors that will represent a risk for our health, and therefore avoiding exposure to certain chemicals, like is the one of these ones that stay. They have this horrible, idea of staying for long in the environment, and therefore the chances of exposure can be high. This is what we are trying to do, make sure that we have the scientific evidence, we provide the recommendations, policy options, we raise awareness about a potential risk for our health, and we propose the solutions when we have it for people to reduce exposure, and if they need the treatment as well, the protocols for treatment. I hope this summarized and captured the idea of starting the panel, Lady T.
Yes, excellent. My key word there was solutions for problems. Next up, my question is for Kay. Well, no, before I jump to Kay, I'm gonna go straight to Teena, so forgive me for that. Teena, why are PFAS and other water contaminants a threat to human health globally, and how do they disproportionately affect women and girls? Now, before you answer, can you give us a little insight in terms of why you're our in-house expert, and then address the question about how it threatens human health globally and how they disproportionately affect women and girls? You're up next, Teena.
You are mute, Teena.
I'm very happy to be here and share with the other panelists and with the participants that I really think the UNA USA, the United Nations Association of the USA, is an absolutely fabulous organization. I've been with it for quite a while. I'm the former president of UNA USA Kentucky for 6 years and currently vice president. But we've looked at human trafficking for over a dozen years, and we added on PFAS, forever chemicals, with the past 3 years. It's really my background, over 20 years in the medical field, and also working as a microbiologist and being trained at the Center for Disease Control in Virology, and also working in hematology, oncology. I couldn't help but react when I first saw the notice from Environmental Working Group, EWG.org, about these chemicals. I'm absolutely blown away. It is something that every American needs to know about, because the Center for Disease Control says that 98% of us have these chemicals in our bodies, even newborn babies today. So our anatomy, of course, the female anatomy is different than the male. And so there are some diseases and problems that we have that they don't necessarily have. But there are, in North Carolina, it was decided that there were 6 specifically to look at, which were kidney cancer and testicular cancer, ulcerative colitis, effects to the immune system, and also to reproduction. And so women have certain exposures in certain occupations that they have, but I'm sure the others will also want to chime in on this. But we especially, they're seeing more breast cancer now, and also mothers should be very concerned because it's in breast milk, and that is still recommended that you have breastfeeding. However, if you're feeding formula, you're also putting water in that, and these chemicals are in drinking water as well. So, and in wastewater and lots of other places. But I'll let you go on to introduce another panelist.
Thank you, Teena. So, as I said, this is our in-house expert. You can see she's a scientist that's been dedicated to polyfluoroalkyl. Next, I have a question for Kay. Kay, what can the UN do to advocate the use of PFAS and other harmful substances? Where do you see women and girls leading these advocacy efforts? And again, if you can give us a minute about your role and what you've been doing, and then address what can the U.S. do to advocate for the use of PFAS and harmful substances, and then give us your insight about advocacy efforts for women and girls. Thank you, Kay.
Hi, thank you very much. And thank you very much for inviting me to speak here on behalf of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Convention Secretariat and the UNEP that administers those conventions. So I'm a scientist at the Secretariat. I coordinate the scientific committee called Persistent Organic Pollutants Review Committee that undertakes a review of chemicals proposed for listing under the convention. The Stockholm Convention, it is under the UNEP, controls the production, use, import, and export of harmful substances called persistent organic pollutants. Those substances are persistent, that means it doesn't break, and bioaccumulative, it means that it accumulates in human fatty tissue, and it has potential for long-range environmental transport, which means that it could travel to a long distance far from the location of release, that means one country cannot solve the issue, but rather it has to be acted upon globally. And it has adverse effects on human health and environment. And as you might know, some of the PFAS have been concluded as persistent organic pollutants by this scientific panel. And the countries have agreed to include those under the Stockholm Convention. So one of the actions that United Nations can take is those multilateral global action. For example, through the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants, to collectively prohibit or severely restrict the production, use of these substances, and also to manage waste and stockpiles of these substances so that it will not further released or spread to the environment, especially from those locations that is far from the manufacture or release. There was another question about how girls and women can advocate and take a role. And indeed, girls and women can take very important role in, for example, science-based decision-making process. The United Nations Environment Assembly that just concluded 2 weeks ago adopted a resolution to establish science policy panel. The Assembly recognized the importance that the scientific information and assessment is very important in taking decisions for sound management of chemicals and waste. And for this purpose, it is important to have communication between scientists and policymakers, or the woman who has the experience in or concerns over exposure to those hazardous substances, to have easy understanding communication with the policymakers that could influence, for example, taking control measures like banning of certain PFAS. And for this process, indeed, there are scientists or policymakers that are women or girls who are learning to become. And so indeed, this is very important role that could be taken in this process. Thank you.
Wow. Okay. I don't know what I'm most excited about. The fact that we have female scientists in this particular session, right? Female scientists. I don't know how one little girl said, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to be a scientist helping the world out. So I want to salute each and every one of you in your respective roles. Now, you hit on two very important areas, science-based and decision-making. This is what we are here today. You all represent gender parity and so many different capacities. And I love that you said that it has to take it's a global effort, not just a one country's effort in terms of advocating. Now, my next question, is for another one of our locals, one of our own, Himaja. We know she is the health advocate. She is truly a human rights defender, not just the advocate, but a defender. So my question is to you, Himaja. What are pre and polyfluoroalkyl? And what's the importance of recognizing PFAS as a class, and or can you elaborate on drinking water and wastewater and any environmental sciences from the background that you represent? But before you answer and address those three, give us a little insight in terms of your role, how you've gotten here, how you too have become an insight expert as it relates to the connection with health. You're up, Himaja.
Thanks so much, Lady T, and thank you all for your wonderful insights today. The way I stumbled into PFOS was very much by accident, I would say. I mean, general in environmental health, the way I approached it was very much by accident. I remember being really passionate about learning about the environment. My background was in neurobio and molecular and cell bio, so I was really into like the hard sciences. But I remember having an undergraduate crisis in the middle of junior year where I was like, I don't really know what I want to do. And it was really through panels like these and actually attending a few sessions at COP25. That was really my insight into the world of environmental science and environmental health that got me really passionate about this. And it's really cool to also see so many of my personal heroes on this screen too. That's kind of how I got into environmental health. How I got into PFAS was very much because PFAS is an emerging contaminant, and a lot of environmental health people have dedicated years and years and years of research into understanding their health effects. Per and polyfluoroalkylated substances are a class of compounds, essentially a class of chemicals. And for anyone who's interested in the chemistry, it's essentially a long carbon chain with a bunch of fluoride atoms attached to each side. Essentially what the significance of that is it creates a really stable compound. So kind of like Teena said, PFAS chemicals oftentimes are released into the environment and they stay in the environment. And because they're really stable compounds, they're oftentimes used in a lot of manufacturing processes. So they're used in a lot of non-stick applications, waterproof, stain resistant. They're used in carpets. They're used in textiles. They're used for a lot of baby products, for example. There's a huge movement also for women and girls, and this is how it pertains to this event that we're having today for CSW, because women and girls oftentimes use personal care products that are really high in PFAS. So thinking about things that we use for our periods, things that we use to take care of our kids, oftentimes that has PFAS in it. And like Teena said, PFAS is found in drinking water as well. It's really persistent in the environment. So once it gets into drinking water, it requires a lot of money on a town side to remediate that. And slowly, but surely, we do have states kind of recognizing the importance of regulating PFAS, and they're actually taking steps to doing so. But I would say we're still long ways to really making sure that we're really addressing the issue, both from just a remediation standpoint, but also from preventing the manufacturing of this from the start. And this is where the whole concept of a class-based policy and regulatory approach really comes into, because if we're able to regulate this class of compounds as a class, we're taking a more systemic approach into trying to remediate it. Just remediating a few iterations of this chemical isn't enough to really address the health effects that come from the wide range of these chemicals and their applications. And so that's why a lot of activists have been really trying to emphasize the importance of a class-based approach and policy. And also speaking to the international aspect of this, You know, we've done a lot of research in the US. We continue to do a lot of research on PFAS, but it's definitely being recognized as an emerging contaminant globally. And so that's where that really plays a role into why we should be thinking about this as a global environmental problem. But I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. I can't emphasize enough the importance of regulation and approaches to regulation. So thank you for the highlighting. So you segue. I know that this next one, our other inside expert, Teena, can echo some of the things that you talk about in terms of why PFAS is a threat to human health and why does the issue disproportionately affect women. But why is there an intersection with the issue? How does PFAS relate to climate crises and environmental injustice? Teena, if you could take that question. You're on mute.
PFAS does contribute to climate change. It is also in fracking. It's in so many things. And it's in the air we breathe. We're actually breathing in chemicals. It comes down in the rain. We just are in touch with it, you know, constantly. In the products, whether it's the carpeting on your floor, whether it's the upholstery on your furniture, no matter where you go, it's in plastics. It is just everywhere. It's in your raincoats. And you think about the person that sews that fabric, that waterproof fabric that has PFAS in it. They're probably inhaling the dust from that as well. So it's just everywhere in the environment, you know, in your clothing, it's in electronics, it's in pizza boxes, it's in popcorn bags, it's inside your house, what you're breathing when you go to the fast food place. And you get your hamburger, it's wrapped in paper that doesn't allow the grease to come through. When you take a bite off of that, you're also ingesting some of the PFAS. There is good news that 2 major chains say that they will phase it out. It's also in your personal care products, and Himaja did a fabulous job describing that. It's in your eye mascara, it's in your lipstick. There are very few that don't put these chemicals in. The main reason the chemicals are used, just as it began being used to Teflon, that we thought was such a miracle, but actually what it does is it doesn't allow the clumping. It allows a very smooth surface. So whether it's your lipstick or whatever you're putting on or whatever it's in, it makes it very smooth. And so that is the reason that it's used in so many different things. There are some medical devices that it's used in as well. But the most well-known, I think, is your cookware, your Teflon. I would like to highlight that here in Kentucky, in Henderson, Kentucky, is a horrible issue right now, a nightmare for the people that live there, because one company that recycles Teflon, that actually shreds the Teflon pans and things, they found really horrific number of parts per trillion of PFAS. And so the people that live there are now wondering what they're breathing, what they're coming in contact with, what's in their drinking water. And so it's been not only their nightmare, but a nightmare in many other places in the United States. I don't know if other countries are as astute to the problems, but we do know that China and other countries are still using the one most notorious chemical, PFOA, that was banned in the United States, as well as I think the United Kingdom and several other countries. So with that, I'll let you ask somebody else a question.
Wow, you tapped on something very, very important in terms of the ban on PFOA. So my next question, we're going to do this kind of round table or popcorn style. Anyone can answer. So I know that there are direct ways and indirect ways that we advocate for PFAS and contaminants. Would anyone like to say some additional direct or indirect ways that they've been doing advocacy and on PFAS or any other contaminants?
Yeah,
If I
maybe.
can, go ahead.
Sorry, Teena, you want to
No
go?
problem. No, go ahead.
Please. No, I wanted again to bring the aspects of public health. You know, I forget to mention at the beginning that I am a medical doctor by training, and you know, in an organization like mine, I mean, the World Health Organization, we look very much at the diseases and then the treatment of those diseases. But in fact, if you want to focus on public health, you need to make sure that you remove or you reduce exposure as much as possible to those risks, and in this case, environmental risk factors that will represent a major risk for human health. If you put together all the environmental risk factors, and among them we have the chemicals, of course, we have climate change, we have air pollution and many others, this will represent 25% of the mortality worldwide. Do you imagine that the incredible opportunity we have here for public health on removing those environmental risk factors? And they can be removed, they are modifiable. And then we could save as much as almost 14 million dead lives every year. So the case of chemicals, of course, chemicals have been contributing enormously to public health. We need to say thank you very much to the modern chemistry on many products that they have been helping us in the hospitals, in our daily life. But now this mixture of chemicals that we have, the interaction between many of them that we use in our daily life, they are taking us on a path of an overuse of certain chemicals. I will invite any woman to start their advocacy movement at home. Go home, check what you have at home, which type of chemical products you have at home. You will be shocked the number of products we are using on a daily basis, plus the cosmetics, all of these things. Try to reduce it. Try to be aware and develop some knowledge about what those chemicals represent on your daily life and for you and your family, and try to reduce, at least on your microcosmos, exposure to those chemicals. You will be surprised on the number of them that are unnecessary use on our daily life. Second, of course, you use any opportunity you have to do advocacy, to raise awareness. The issue of endocrine disrupting chemicals is a very serious one. Some of those chemicals, they behave as if they were a hormone, you know, so your endocrine system will be completely crazy, and you know, we will develop some diseases and issues that are putting at risk our reproductive, you know, as humans. So we need to be very conscious of that. And then the end point will be legislation. In some cases, we can go as far as legislation. And when mothers and women and girls, they are aware of the damage that certain substances like the PFAS can do to the health of their children, they become incredible activists. They can go very, very far. In fact, in most of the big battles around chemicals, you always see a woman. And there are many examples, including now on air pollution. We have an incredible champion in UK. So certainly is a question that when you link this to the public health and you specifically describe what is this doing to the health of you and your children, then things can change, and then women will go on a very proactive and strong way on changing legislation and then policies, and going as far as even remove it if possible. Over.
Bravo, bravo. Yes, you gave a great snapshot in terms of the inequality and a call to action about what we can do, Dr. Maria. Bravo, bravo. I know, Teena, you wanted to answer the question too about how we can advocate against PFAS and other contaminants. Oh, please chime in, Teena.
Yes, I just want to applaud Dr. Neira for her comments, and I totally agree that it's going to take women, women who are even mothers. You don't have to be mothers, but if you're a mother, you should care even more. Any living human being should care about the future of our planet and of the future of our planetary health and our environment. But I'm a super advocator, and it was even on a Zoom this morning, advocating for PFAS, for legislation and for help. We actually have legislation last year and this year. It hasn't gone anywhere, unfortunately, but we have a resolution that did pass this year to establish PFAS Awareness Day. That is something anybody could try to get in their General Assembly, in their state General Assembly, to get a PFAS Awareness Day. Another thing that we would like to do is have people watch the movie Dark Waters. We're working to try to host that so that it could be a screening, could be shown. It is actually a documentary movie that will provide a whole lot of information to you about the chemicals and the health effects. But the advocacy can also be done with Congress as well. Please do try to contact your congressional person. Tell them that you've heard about PFAS. Tell them that you're concerned about it. You're concerned about the health effects that you're hearing about, and that you would like that addressed. Now, don't feel like you're talking to somebody that doesn't know what you're talking about. There are over 80 pieces of legislation in Congress right now on PFAS. So feel free to talk to them about this. If you talk to a legislator that doesn't know about PFAS, please provide them some information. There's plenty of information out there, and keep it simple. That's really important. You can also work on the local level. We've not had as much luck here on the local level to get the interest there, but it's still important that you have to do that. You have to, don't give up, just because they say no, go to another person or go back to that person later. Maybe they'll have some experience in their life that they will feel differently about it. So I say keep on keeping on, and you can call the White House operator to give a message to the president at whitehouse.gov. You can also go to your congressional person at 1-202-225-3121, and call your local people as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Teena, for giving us direct ways where in the United States we can get involved. I'm going to segue my next question to Kay, because this is a global issue. So yes, we have an audience that are here in the United States, but we also have some global citizens as well. So Kay, what do you believe we can do as individuals from your perspective, from your lens, your point of view, to reduce the purchasing of textiles and clothes, the stain, water, flame, resistant materials? What are some of the things from your perspective, Kay, do you think that we as individuals that we can do regarding forever chemicals?
Right, thank you very much. I got a little bit momentarily out of the connection, but I'm happy to be back. Indeed, yes, for individuals to take part and act upon, the first step is to know about the chemical, where it is used, where we can find around ourselves, and what are really the impacts of those substances. You might be surprised how much of our daily products or consumer materials may contain PFAS, because this is a substance very helpful, useful in protecting materials from water or oil or dirt. It has very convenient functionality. Like if you want to protect your clothes from getting wet, I'm sure you might have used once or twice putting it around your shoes or your umbrella or your bag. Even in ski wax, that you want to go faster with cross-country skiing, you apply something that makes it slippery, and that is it. Cooking pans, another material that you can find this related substances in there. It's important to be aware of the use of substances in your daily products, and make a good selection as a consumer. But another also, I mean, every individual might have a role in your society. You might be scientist, you might be part of industry, you might be selling products, you might be a teacher. And as you know, this global issue, it requires multi-stakeholder action. And that means that every role that you might have in your society, you can take part. If you're a teacher, you can talk to your children, students, and advocate in that role. If you're a retailer, you can also select those products that are free of substances. These are some little things that you might be able to do as an individual. Another area that you might want to be aware of is when these substances are more strongly impacting the environment. This is when the substance is directly discharged, for example, in firefighting foam. So this is something that you don't use it in your daily life, but our pesticides also, this application that could be directly discharged to the environment might have larger impact in turn, for example, contaminating water and so on. So understanding your daily products in your life, but as at the same time to know where these PFAS could be released into the environment, and in the end in impacting your exposure level to PFAS through contaminating water would be very important, something that you could do as an individual level.
Lady T, if I could add that it was a woman that went to the Firefighting Association. The general president is Edward A. Kelly, and he said that she is the one that kept on after her firefighter husband passed away of testicular cancer, that she kept telling him it was the chemicals, it was the chemicals, it was the chemicals. Finally, his quote is, quote, "Occupational cancer is the #1 killer of firefighters." There are lawsuits now over the chemicals. They are wanting to phase those chemicals out. It all began for a good initiative when the Navy went to 3M and asked them to help because they had a naval ship that had about 139 that were trapped downstairs and died in the fire, and about the same number who were injured. So it began with a good effort, but now we know that these are causing serious problems. A couple of other things that are more specific to women is the endometriosis and also preeclampsia. These are two important issues, and Dr. Neira, you might want to comment a little more on those.
I'm sorry, somebody was joking and saying that today the unmute was one of the most used words in our panel. So I think I was struggling with my microphone. Yes, you're right. I mean, this is maybe very much related to the ways of exposure as well, because it's again, and here we are talking about women that are living on developed countries, I mean, rich countries, countries where legislation and occupational health standards will provide an additional protection. But as you can imagine, in WHO and UNEP and other global organizations, we look as well as what's happening in the rest of the world. And for most women, there is an occupational exposure, which is very important. There is as well at home and then the fact that there is a poverty, that they will accept certain ways of even recovering and recycling of certain materials that are in the environment to make some money. So the issues is related to your social economic status, the ways of exposure depending on where you are, and how much the government or the state can protect you if you are, depending on which part of the world you are living. That will be a question as well of social difference, and gender, of course, will be very much on that.
Yes, I fully agree. I think that the most important thing that we can do when talking about issues such as PFAS and other environmental contaminants is looking at it through an environmental justice lens, like you said. So thinking about, how women and children of low socioeconomic status are disproportionately affected by PFAS, thinking about it from a racial justice standpoint, how women and girls of color are disproportionately affected, whether it's with the products that they use. So products with high amounts of PFAS are oftentimes those that are able to be manufactured more cost effectively. And so they target people of low socioeconomic status, and people of low socioeconomic status are more likely to be exposed. Thinking about it from a water standpoint, in our local community in Massachusetts, one thing that we've been trying to address and learn more about is how water contamination and how certain levels of PFAS are higher for certain areas and neighborhoods of towns and cities that have high minority populations, and how high minority populations are, as a result, getting more exposed to these harmful chemicals. And so it's a really important connection that we make when we talk about any environmental contaminant, is how is this disproportionately affecting those more vulnerable and marginalized?
Wow, great. I want to say the power went out in South Carolina, but I'm back. So here's my burning question. I have 2-point questions, and any one of you can answer them. One is, I know Teena talked about Dark Waters, the movie with Mark Ruffalo, and we know that Erin Brockovich was involved in PFAS. Now, do any of you have any final thoughts or words about the Erin Brockovich element with the PFAS and round table or popcorn style? If we can just wrap up. I know we have 3 more minutes before we transition into our next session, but this has been a burning question for me with these wonderful female scientists and thought leaders on this subject matter. What do you think about the connection with Erin Brockovich?
Well, I encourage everybody to watch the movie Erin Brockovich, in which hexavalent chromium 6 is the pollutant there. However, it's like, hallelujah, she's involved in PFAS also. So, once a fighter to set things right, always a fighter. So I'm very proud of her that she has continued her legacy to work with PFAS.
Absolutely. Popcorn
we need
style.
a lot of Erin Brockovich. We need a lot, and everywhere in rich and less rich countries. And for sure, we will have a woman. We have it on other issues like air pollution. We have an incredible champion now in UK called Rosamund Kisi-Debra. She managed to change the legislation because her daughter has asthma, and she was concerned about the fact that exposure to air pollution would be something affecting her. So we have, as I said before, when women are concerned about the health of their children, they can move mountains. And the mountains sometimes in this aspect can be very, very high, like Erin changing the legislation with minimum resources. But I'm sure that we will have plenty of Erin. But we need to make sure that the women are aware and they understand that there is an impact on the health, and they are alternates as well. And there are other ways to use chemicals that are very good for our daily life without having those who are representing a major harm for our health.
Excellent.
I would like to also add that indeed Erin Brockovich and advocators' side is important, but we also need supporters from private sector. They are the ones who are manufacturing, using the chemical. They have the knowledge about potential issues. And instead of making a big gap between the civil society and private sector, it is important to continue risk communication and have a good understanding each other. And really, it's the private sector who can play a very important role in research and development and make sure that the substitution is not going to be a regrettable one. As you might know, one of the PFAS, early listed under the Stockholm Convention, called perfluorooctane sulfonic acid, PFOS, this chemical was replaced by PFOA, perfluorooctanoic acid, which also is equally bad as you look at from the point of view of chemical characteristics. It's because the chemical requires certain functionality, and if you know, it is indeed the private sector, the manufacturer, who has the power to develop safer alternatives, introduce those substances, and therefore I think that of course we do need advocacy and civil society to work very actively, but also to have all the stakeholders working together towards the same goal, and including private sector.
Yes, indeed. Wow, you ladies have been the epitome of what leadership and changing systems and being actively involved. I say to each and every one of you that's here today, you do not need permission to lead. You do not need permission to be an ally. Now, next up, thank you, our wonderful panel, but we are going to transition over to London Bell for our Q&A session. So London, I'm turning it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Lady T. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. I have learned so much listening to you all talk, and there are quite a few questions in the chat. And I wanted to first share with you, and I don't know if you had a chance to see the chat. I had never heard of PFAS before, ever, until one day I was watching the news and there was footage of PFAS actually oozing onto the highway in Metro Detroit. There was an industrial facility not far away, and I guess the chemicals had started to go into the ground, the water, and it was just like out there for everyone to see, and it was very scary. And so and someone also asked, and I have this same question: how long have these chemicals been prevalent? When, like, what did they replace? And I know you've talked about descriptions of what it is, but when should this have come onto our radar? And does anyone want to start?
This is Teena. I would say that in 1938, the scientist Roy Plunkett discovered PFAS. Then in the 1940s, more was used by DuPont chemical. And then, well, at 3M. And then in 1951, DuPont began getting materials from 3M, and eventually, I think, produce their own. But as Kai pointed out, the PFOA, the most notorious one, was replaced with Gen X, a trade name made by DuPont Chemical. And the Gen X, they are finding, although it's 6 carbons instead of 8, they're finding almost the same medical results that look very bad. So, and also just to point out why they are called forever chemicals, some can remain in the environment for thousands of years.
Can I say something, London?
Yeah, sure.
Just to remind all of our participants, I mean the public that is following very nicely, that unfortunately it takes normally a long time between the day we have a signal, even a very small signal, and the day we finally have a convention. I'm thinking of mercury now. I mean, that has been a very long process since the day that the health community, WHO and others, we put it on the table, the evidence that mercury was having an impact on the health of the people. And the day we had the Minamata Convention, which is not even covering all the mercury, but still at least some. You will remember the asbestos, you know, all of those materials, they came to the market as something very good for our daily life. And it's good, it is true that they have very good properties, but unfortunately the harm on human health started to be described little by little. And this is the problem with most of those chemicals, that it takes a long time between the day you have some signal on the impact on human health and the day you reach an agreement under UNEA on a convention. And that's very painful for most of us, because it's very frustrating that we see that the speed, once you have scientific evidence and when you remove those from the market, is not at the level of the concern we have on human health. And look at the lead in gasoline. Remember that a beautiful example. Well, we still have few countries around the world where they include the lead in gasoline and lead in paint. So we need to certainly accelerate those agendas once the evidence is there and the decision from a political point of view is there. We need to accelerate the removal and the convention's action, but there is a political and conflict of commercial interest as well linked to that.
Maybe
Yes.
if I could also add that coming also back from the United Nations Environment Assembly, the last assembly adopted the resolution to establish an international negotiation committee for development of the
Plastics,
legally
yeah.
binding instrument on plastic pollution. So for these plastic issues, it has been there for several decades issues, but least recently, the power of media and having the people's awareness of ever increasing number of plastics you can see in the environment, that really stroke people's awareness, and that moved policymakers really quickly towards the concrete action. And in that resolution, the government agreed to develop this legally instrument within 2 years. So it could take long, but where there is a will, it could also move fast. The very big difference between plastics and the issues that we're talking about here is that chemicals are invisible. It is less clear to people's mind what is it that needs to be addressed. Plastics, it's easier to see when the animals are entangled. You really see hurt. But then this slowly affecting your health or slowly affecting the environment is a little bit difficult to move people quickly. And for that purpose as well, this science policy panel that could be established very soon, negotiated by the government, could be something that supports the decision making on the basis of scientific information. And under the Stockholm Convention, there is a mechanism to add new substances, and there's a review process that takes about 4 years. And through this process, PFOS was added, PFOA was added, and now PFHXS, the substance with 6 carbons, perfluorohexane sulfonic acid, is going to be considered for listing in next June. And so those are good development. And another set of PFAS, long chain PFCA, perfluorocarboxylic acid, are also under review. But this is a good news, but at the same time, it's bad news, because those are all replacements of the initial PFOS that were used. And that's why I think that it is also very important to involve all levels of stakeholders to address this issue.
Yes,
And
I definitely
to
echo
correct
that.
myself, UNEP is putting on the chat a link to the press release that few months ago, the world was clean of lead in gasoline. But so I am wrong by few months, sorry.
Thank you,
No
Dr.
worries,
Maria.
thank you.
Yes.
And
And
if I can
Himaja.
add really fast, you know, 100%, I think that I forgot to mention, so I'm an environmental health epidemiology student at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. And this is something that we talk about a lot when it comes to environmental contaminants, is how risk decision-based science and decision-making processes based on risk decision oftentimes do vary significantly, especially when we think about the national and international level. It's really hard, exactly like you said, to compile enough information to make federal or global standards that everyone has to adhere to. And so that's why that process takes a really long time. But London, as we always say, I think that that's why one of the most important things we can do is think global, act local. Local action and local policy can really drive the efforts that we need to see at the national, at the international level. A case in point, you know, for our state in Massachusetts, we have been working really hard to try to control PFOS. So we now have a maximum contaminant level for PFOS of 20 parts per trillion. And this is for 6 PFOS chemicals. Hopefully we'll expand it to more, but for now it is 6 of the thousands that currently exist. And we're also, I was really excited to have the opportunity to work with Senator Joe Comerford, who's a Massachusetts state senator. And we put together a PFOS bill controlling PFOS use in certain common consumer products that oftentimes contain PFAS. That's now going through the Senate Ways and Means Committee. So it's taking its steps. But exactly like everyone said, you know, this seems like a monumental problem, right? Like, you look at the statistics, 98% of Americans have PFAS in their blood. You look at the global statistics, we're seeing that PFAS manufacturing is increasing globally. People are being more exposed to this. It seems like a monumental problem, but the way we can really break it down and have an impact, regardless of whether you're a scientist or a policymaker or an advocate or a concerned person in your community, learning more about this and educating others as you go, all of you have a role to play in really making sure that PFAS and other environmental contaminants are talked about. So that way we can truly have equity. And people, you know, and to recognize the great women that have led this. I mean, thinking about our Indigenous communities, they have been huge advocates when it comes to environmental contaminants, such as PFAS. Women have oftentimes led this, and they're oftentimes the silent advocates. They're the advocates that we oftentimes don't know their names of, but they're there and they're in our communities and they're advocating. So just to say that, you know, the people on this panel, the people in our audience, thank you for joining us, and to really just say that you're all really a key part of the advocacy and the drive that we need to address PFAS and to try to get it regulated so that we can all live in a more safe and healthy environment.
Absolutely, Himaja. Absolutely. Thank you. And Teena, did you have something to add?
I might add that we should give a shout out because President Biden early on made a pledge to help with PFAS. He kept that pledge. He put in place US EPA Administrator Michael Reagan, who was the perfect point person who came from a PFAS disaster area in North Carolina. And so he was head of that as Deputy Environmental Quality Director. So he knows all about it. He really understands it. He really gets it. He's gone in person to Mossville, Alabama and other places to meet with the residents who've never had anything like that happen in their lives. They came out, he formed the PFAS Council, and they came out with a PFAS strategic roadmap. And that roadmap is awesome. Just Google PFAS strategic roadmap, and it will blow your mind the actions that they will be taking before and by 2024. So this is going to become a household word. It's happening.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that, Teena. And as you all were talking, of course, 100 more questions came to me, and there are other folks in the chat. So I want to start out by asking, and anyone can answer, and you may not even be able to share it at this moment, but I'm curious personally, how PFAS and other, forever chemicals, how they cause or impact people living with chronic disease. I live with a very rare chronic autoimmune disease. Is there somewhere we could, look to see how these chemicals are directly impacting their case studies, so that we can understand the real world impact on these chemicals?
There's an amazing amount of research going on right now. It is absolutely amazing. I know the attorney who spent 20 years of his life to uncover the hidden truth about PFAS. He knows that when he typed in on his computer back then, he typed in PFOA and nothing would come up. You try that today and you will find out there is all kinds of research on PFAS. Yes, I would say that there may not be, in the studies, they always like to have big numbers, at least 1,000. And so, when you're dealing with rare diseases, it's difficult to get a good number. But yes, still in the literature, people will report their findings. They will say, that more study needs to be done, and we only had X number of people. But at least it's a beginning, and at least people can find some information. So
Okay.
There's a lot of information out there.
Great. Great. Thank you, Teena. And I will, here's a very good question. And I'm wondering, Kay, or Dr. Maria, or even Teena, if you can answer this question. Is there a safe level of PFAS found in drinking water? Who wants to go?
I think eventually they're going to.
Oh,
You went to Teena. You're mute.
I think eventually they will find that it's going to be like lead and mercury and others in which it is just really no safe level. And I can say that Linda Birnbaum, who was with the National Institute of Environmental Health, said that she would say less than 0.1 because of the pancreatic tumors seen in mice. And the other organizations, don't want to have that much. Many states now have gone to create their own standards, and some of those will combine like 5 of them. They don't want to go over 20 parts per trillion. But today, what is happening is when you take a glass of water, you may have several chemicals in there. When you take a bite of food, it may have several chemicals in it. So we are breathing in, we're ingesting, drinking 8 glasses of water a day, hopefully. And their dermal absorption is not as much, but anyway, those are avenues in which you can be exposed. So we're just constantly being bombarded. It will take the consumer. It will take us. We are the ones that, I walk in the store, I see some little night clothes and I think, oh, those would be wonderful. But then I look and I see the flame retardant tag on it and I'm like, no, I'm not going to buy those. So it's going to take us to call the manufacturer and say, do you have PFAS in my mascara? It's going to take us to point them out and that, it's harming your consumer.
Okay. Want to call on Kay. Do you have anything to add?
Well, yes. So indeed, the standard level are set by different countries based on different scientific data. And as Teena said, indeed, well, PFAS is indeed itself is a group of chemicals, and that the standard is often specified with a specific chemical substance, like a combination of PFOS and PFOA, and so on. So it is quite more technical, and it's not really straightforward. But some states or countries, they have the standard level they consider as an advisory level, concentration level for drinking water. But again, indeed, it's also very important to be reminded about toxic interactions, that you are exposed of not just only one set of chemical, but multiple substances, and that could have multiple impacts. Drinking water might be also contaminated by dioxins and furans. It could be by PCB, and all these combination could affect human health. Very concerning with the breast milk level that you can see. Almost all of the breast milk samples that we are measuring as part of the global monitoring plan under the Stockholm Convention, we are detecting PFAS at the rate of 92 to 100% detection level, so rate. And so, yeah, indeed, I think we humans are exposed to several different substances in this world. And the government is making the best available health advisory level for drinking waters, including for PFAS.
Wow, thank you, Kay. And Dr. Maria, did you have anything more that you'd like to add to this question?
No, I think WHO has the air quality, the water quality guidelines, and then each country adopt on their own legislation for that. But Kay raised one of the critical issues. Well, first, in principle, for certain chemicals, for us, there is no safe level. I mean, it shouldn't be a safe level. But in addition to that, she raised a very important question, which is this multiple exposure. And this is where we have a major challenge to define to what you are exposed and how those different chemicals interact among them. And then is where we have real challenges from a scientific point of view. We can go one by one on all the chemicals, but what we don't know is on the interaction on 3 of them or several of them, and to what level of exposure you are on your daily life. What is your level of exposure, depending on the different sources and the different chemicals you are exposed to. So that's the real challenge.
And then a quick follow-up question for the conventions. Is this an avenue where states report out on the levels that they have within their statutory limits and ways that we can, as advocates, it's always really beneficial for us to know how states are operating, whether it be our own state or other member states. Is there a way we can learn about that?
A person can always contact their water company to find out if they're testing. Right now, most water companies are going to be testing, and the US EPA in its strategic plan, they're going to be testing for 29 the PFAS chemicals. Some of the problems have been the methodology. Now, US EPA will be training how to use the method that they want used, because you shouldn't have different methods everywhere. You all need to be doing everything the same way. I did want to point out something that I thought was very important, which is a study that was done by Dr. Philippe Grandjean. He studied COVID, and the specific chemical PFBA, perfluorobutyric acid. And he looked at the COVID patients who were asymptomatic without any symptoms or few symptoms, through up to the ones that had the most symptoms, that were either on respirators or expired. And what he found was those patients who had less of the chemical in their blood were the ones who were asymptomatic and doing pretty good. And those who had the most were the ones that were dying or seriously ill. And those kinds of studies need to be replicated, because sometimes it's not the first researcher who finds the out and makes the discovery, but it is later when it is confirmed by another study. So this is very important. I got to see his presentation when he first gave it before it was even peer reviewed, and it blew my mind. I thought this is really the way to look at, because our immune systems are being interfered with. And this may be why we have to continue getting more and more COVID immunizations.
So Teena, do you have information on that study? Something you can drop in the chat for folks?
Sure.
Okay, while you're doing that,
Okay.
and I have just, I have one final question, but Dr. Marie, I wanted to come back to you, asking you about the conventions and how states are communicating with the UN. Is this where we can learn more about how they're reporting out?
With pleasure, but Kay will be much better than me on that, because UNEP is the one responsible for the conventions, and the rest of us, we contribute, but I'm sure Kay will be better placed than me to respond to that question.
Thank you. Kay, could you answer that question?
You are mute, Kay.
Sorry, could you please repeat the question?
Yeah, I was just wondering about this convention in particular. Is this where UN member states are submitting, information on how they are using these chemicals? And is there a way that we can learn more about how states are doing that?
Right, yes. So the Stockholm Convention has provision to develop national implementation plans. So each country is supposed to develop, describe how they plan to implement the Stockholm Convention to eliminate the chemicals that are listed under the convention. And so looking at the national implementation plans of the parties, which are available on the website, you can learn what are expected in the different countries. And another obligation of the parties to the convention is to report on their progress in implementation every 4 years. It's called national reporting, and there you can see how well each country is being implementing, addressing those chemicals. Another information that is very helpful is from Global Monitoring Plan. As I said, there are regional groups that are collecting the measured levels of POPs globally, including PFAS. Currently, PFOS and PFOA are listed. So those are measured in water and air, and also in human blood and breast milk samples. And the objective is to observe the trend, how it is being effectively reducing the levels of POPs from the global level through implementation of the Stockholm Convention. So you can take a look at that.
Thank you so much, Kay. And before I turn it back over to Lady T, I just have one last question. I'm going to direct this for Himaja. I know that we've talked about, because this is good information to have from the UN, so that we can use it as advocates to advocate to our government on how to make changes and to, on these forever chemicals. And I want to ask you, Himaja, I know we've talked a lot about how we can advocate. Are there any are there any other ways women and girls in particular can be advocates to eliminate forever chemicals?
I love that question. I think that there are so many ways. For any young women and girls who are interested in science, this is a really interesting field to study, especially at this time where we are seeing the data coming. We do have a lot of scientific evidence to show that PFAS is harmful. The evidence is continuing to grow, and more evidence is always important, especially when trying to understand the effects that PFAS have. So throwing that out there for any people interested in pursuing this from a scientific perspective. From a policy perspective as well, definitely, inform your local officials. Oftentimes, even just having discussions with your local elected officers, those are really helpful because it's sometimes just bridging that educational gap. That's the difference between having a policy and not having a policy on something. It helps them inform their funding decisions. That's what happened in our town of Acton. We used some of our funding from the American Rescue Plan Act, which was given to local governments across the US to address some of the things that may have been put to the side because of COVID-19. It was a way to reinvest into local governments, state governments. And that's what we actually used our ARPA funding for. And that really came through advocacy efforts from people who knew about PFAS, who knew this was an issue that the water district needed more money to resolve. And that's where their advocacy played a role. And last but not least, I just want to note that this is a very pivotal year in the US, for example, when it comes to elections. Having elected officials who understand the importance of addressing environmental contaminants is absolutely critical to making sure that it remains a priority for PFOS and other contaminants of interest. And also thinking of climate change and thinking about the way that local action can really drive change at the national and international level to address these types of global issues. So definitely make sure that, you continue to remain an active resident of your place, making sure that you encourage people to vote, that you vote yourself, that you get people excited about elections, because that's where a lot of change can really happen.
Thank you, Himaja. Thank you so much. And I'm going to ask our other panelists also to offer some closing remarks about everything that we've talked about today. And so I'm going to start with Dr. Maria. Is there anything you'd like to share with us as we close out?
Just to go for it. I like the idea of having scientists, women and girls. The more scientists we have, the better. The more we are informed as citizens, the better as well, particularly on issues like this one where we can make a change and it will be for the good of our people's health. So, small task.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Kay, how about you? Any final thoughts?
Yes, indeed. A lot said in the discussion. It is great to connect with you. And as I mentioned earlier, I think each one of us may have different roles in society. And at any level, whatever you have your role, you can play and make influence towards the same goal. If you are particularly interested also in plastic pollution, for example, plastics has additives, and that could also be of concern for health. When you talk about the risk of chemicals, it's not just only PFAS, but it could also be a mixture of chemicals that could affect your health. And being aware of these issues and take part in part of the solution in any of the roles that you have in your society would be great. And from that perspective, I think women and girls are in particular important, as we have different roles at a different level and playing very important part of the family and the society as you grow older as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And Teena, how about you?
I just say, be a clean water advocate. Everybody likes clean water, and understand that clean water means better health. And so, we don't need to bankrupt our government by being ill. And so our government should also be willing to help us. But also, even in North Carolina, DuPont stepped up to use granulated activated charcoal filtration to remove PFAS. Problem exists with Gen X. It needs reverse osmosis. And also air emissions can be curtailed, guaranteed by the company for 99.9% efficacy to remove PFAS with a thermal oxidizer. The more that the exposure is there, the more ways will be looked for. Also, it's a high temperature incineration of over 1,000 degrees centigrade to destroy. One company has come out with what they call the PFAS annihilator, which I had read about pressure cooker about 1.5 years ago. And basically that is their method, is a pressure cooker. So these things can be replicated. They can, more things can be learned. They can look for different chemicals to use. They can look for different formulas. They want to keep making their products because they're selling them. But if the consumers won't buy them, they're not going to make them. So, please do advocate. Please do talk to your officials, talk to your family, talk to your friends, talk to your schoolmates, talk to anybody you can, and pique their interest, or just send them a little something on email, send them a little YouTube, look at this. And one legislator I sent information to, he wrote back and he said, "This is scary." And I wrote back and I said, "Yes, it is." But we can always write these things. We can always change for good. And so we just have to persevere with that.
Thank you, Teena. Thank you very much. I'm sure I can speak for everyone here when I say, wow, we have learned so much from all of you, and just want to thank you so much. One thing I know, and I always feel this way when UNA USA hosts a panel, an esteemed panel like you all, is that we're always reminded how powerful we are, how powerful our voices are. And so thank you once again for that reminder. And of course, as an advocacy organization, we always try to engage participants by doing an advocacy ask. And so this is what we're doing today. Urging your elected officials to work with the UN to create a gender equal world. So as advocates, text women to 30644, and that will allow you to connect, to send a message to your members of Congress. And because all of us working together, communicating with our members of Congress, we are stronger together, of course. So I want to thank you all for joining us today. I want to turn it back over to Lady T for a moment. Oh, before I do that, don't forget, of course, to join UNA USA. You can go to unausa.org/join. I have been a member for years and years, and many of us have been members for a long time. It is a very, very it's a wonderful organization to join, and you will be involved in so many different ways that you couldn't imagine. So please join us as UN advocates, and I'm going to turn it over to Lady T to close us out.
Wow. Incredible session on forever chemicals. I don't know what I enjoyed most. I don't know if I enjoyed most these wonderful women who are full of she power, who are leaders in their respective fields, and experts and scientists and thought leaders, or if I have enjoyed the important deliberate dialogue regarding the risk factors associated with forever chemicals, the mortality impact, the 25% that Dr. Maria shared with us, or if I have taken away so much about toxic interpreters in the water from Kay, I was like blown away. And then even the challenge of being actively engaged from an environmental standpoint, which Himaja added to the table. And then we cannot leave out all of the statistics and data and research and commitment and advocacy that Teena has been doing for many, many years as one of two of our local experts. So I agree, we must think global and act local. Thank you, London, for that contribution. And simply said, we have to go for it. You know why we have to go for it? Because across the globe, gender inequalities remain enshrined in our lives in our laws, in our environment, in our policies, in our norms, and pervading every sphere of our lives. And so that's why the SDGs and all the intersectionality that the SDGs represent in the world's largest to-do list is critical, because people, the planet, prosperity, peace, and partnerships matters. So I'm going to leave you with, you don't need permission to lead. Each and every one of us are leaders. We are major stakeholders in this fight against forever chemicals. I hope that you walked away today being informed, and that you can take that information and do something with it within your own sphere of influence. This is Lady T. Thompson and UNA USA's completion of our wonderful CSW63 side event. We thank you all. Thank you, wonderful women, for participating. All the best to you and yours. Please stay positive, please stay safe, and please stay involved.